Hello there, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the first ever creepypasta that inspired a huge internet culture, Ted the Caver. So creepypastas are horror-related stories that people make up and post online. And Ted the Caver is a story that may be the first one that was ever told. Now, the story of Ted the Caver is so interesting, not only because it inspired such a massive community, but also because it was so hyper-realistic. Like, everybody at the time, I believe, thought that this was real, possibly. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the story of Ted the Caver. But before we get into the video, we need a quick word from our sponsors. You thought I got sponsors? It's me! It's merch! I'm dropping merch! Got the Hollow Earth, Killdozer, Live Free or Killdozer. I know you guys been looking for this. I know it. But I also have got the Hollow Earth in the gray. It's pretty fresh. 100% cotton on some of them. Most of them, I think. And then I also got the Hollow Earth in black. I really like this one. The Killdozer, we got this in multiple colors. We got this one in gray, black, the lighter gray. I think I'm going to do it in white too. But, guys, it's the conspiracy closet. You need to get dripped out, okay? You're looking a little non-drippy. It's a no-brainer. Imagine telling people that you got your clothes from the conspiracy closet. This is not a brand deal. This is my merch. This is epic. Live Free or Killdozer. It's a true hero. Go get it now. Link in the description. Go shop the Conspiracy Closet. That's my merch. Go get it. Thanks, guys. Back to the video. So to start this off, this entire story is told like an online blog. This guy is going and uploading stories about his journeys in these caves, like it's a caving forum. It's in this nice journal format, it's really authentic looking, and it's extremely detailed. So let's begin with the first day. December 30th, 2000. This is the first time we see our main character Ted along with his friend B going caving together. Ted knew that there was this mysterious hole in this cave that he had been to before, with a constant stream of air flowing through the hole, but he doesn't really know why. They were really experienced cavers, Ted and B were, and it's also worth noting that B had injured himself severely in a caving incident a while back, and that he has a hard time getting around. He's a little bit larger, so that's why he doesn't go in some areas that Ted does. So to get into the cave, mystery cave, that Ted wanted to go explore that little tiny hole with the air blowing through, they had to rappel down several ledges and then also crawl on their hands and knees through this smaller shaft to get into this large room that had 4 tunnels in it. And of the 4 tunnels, 2 were dead ends. The middle to the right had stagnant water in it, so they couldn't go through. And then the furthest to the right was another dead end, but it had a small hole that Ted really wanted to take a look at. And when they got there to the hole with the wind blowing through it in the very back of the cave as far as they could go, Ted and B both agreed that they could probably rip open the hole and maybe, possibly, there was another passage back there that no one had been to in thousands or possibly millions of years. And this is like a holy grail for some cavers. They call it a virgin passage. Basically, the idea of getting somewhere that no one has been for a super long time is extremely intriguing to them. So in Ted's blog, he includes this picture for his online journal, where he shows the size of the hole compared to a glove that he brought, and he stuffed it up in the hole. So they were super excited. They started brainstorming about how they would make the tiny hole larger. They said that they could probably use a power drill or a pin with a hammer and a chisel. But while they were talking and all this excitement, the first strange event happened. The wind that was going through the hole and doing that consistent howling started to do this low rumbling noise, and it really made them wonder what was going on. They theorized that it could possibly be trucks driving over the highway or something, but after all of that, they decided that they could probably still open it up and they weren't really worried about that. So they were going to manually open up the hole. They then decided to give the hole a name, and they called it Floyd's Tomb, which is a reference to a guy named Floyd Collins. He is one of the guys who discovered Mammoth Caves National Park. He was a really famous caver. Actually, I think he was the most famous caver in the world. And Floyd Collins, the guy who's named after this place, became trapped after a cave-in happened and pinched him underneath the rock, and he starved to death. It was a whole big deal. You can look that up. It's real. Anyways, yeah, they decided they could open it up, and that it would be a really tight squeeze even if they could open it up. But the payout would be worth it because they could possibly see a new place that hasn't been seen in thousands of years. And then here's a drawing of it. Ted made a drawing for his blog to show what it looked like. January 27th, 2001, Ted and B return with tools to drill open the hole. They realized that the opening of the hole after drilling for a while was going to be a lot harder than they thought. They noted that the low rumbling noise that they had heard before was somehow getting louder that day, and they felt as if something was getting closer to them for some reason. That day, after the second drill battery had died, they decided to pack it up for the day and then ascend to the surface, leaving behind the tools. And then the next entry is February 10th, 2001. And then the blog goes on to talk about how B had asked some of his caving friends what the low rumbling noise potentially was, and then they said it could possibly be an underground waterfall, which made them a lot more excited. So this day, B brought his little Jack Russell Terrier to join them. It's a little bitty dog. Here's a picture of it, I think. They've used the dog before on caving adventures to try to figure out how deep these caves are, or if they're just dead ends. So that's what the goal was today. They went down there with the dog. It was really excited. It started smelling everywhere. That was until they entered the chamber that had the small hole in the wall at the back of the cave. This is when the dog started acting really weird. It acted like it was really scared. Its hair was raising up on its back, and it started to whimper and act really weird, as if something was about to come out and attack him. B was chiseling on the hole when he suddenly stopped, and he started to hear the strange noise like rock was grinding against rock. But they continued drilling that day until the hole was large enough that they could actually stick their head through. But what was strange is as soon as it was large enough, the wind suddenly stopped blowing through the hole, which was really odd. And the low rumbling stopped as well. The next time they were able to go into the cave together was March 3rd, 2001. And this time they didn't bring the dog with them because they didn't want to be there and it was really freaked out, which was weird because they had done it before with the dog. When they had got back to the hole, the low rumbling and blowing was going again, and they ended up working for several hours until they were on their last drill battery. This is when they heard the most terrifying sound of their lives. They were drilling as usual, but suddenly a blood-curdling scream came out of that hole. It was so loud that it echoed through the cavern, and Ted and B both looked at each other and were so surprised. Ted, who was drilling the hole, looked into the hole as if some sort of horrifying demonic entity could have suddenly came out at any moment. But his friend B said that it was potentially an animal that had gotten trapped on the other side, so they immediately started loading up the hole with rocks to keep whatever it was in there from coming out because it sounded terrible. After waiting for several minutes after loading up the hole to see if anything would happen, nothing happened. So they decided that it wasn't that big of a deal and they continued to work. As they removed the rocks after waiting for a while, they noticed that the wind coming out of the hole and the rumbling stopped as soon as the last large rock was removed from the hole. This makes me think that there was something sentient making this wind rush through the hole and the low rumbling. Anyways, March 4th, 2001. Just the next day, they had completely forgotten about the horrifying screaming they had heard, and they climbed eagerly back into the cave to begin their work again. The breeze and the low rumbling were both back. After a little while, B let out a cheer and showed Ted that a large section had came off, and this made it large enough to where Ted could get his body through the hole. This is where there's another picture that he took with his disposable camera. He said that it was so tight this time that his skin was getting scraped on all the sides and he had to barely wiggle through, and he decided to tie a rope around his legs in case he fell through into who knows where. As he wiggled through, he had to like breathe in and breathe out to make sure he could pass through, which was really sketchy. But he decided that it was just too tight and that they really needed to scrape the sides if they were going to explore the area. April 7th, 2001. So this is about a month later. Ted had rigged up his scraping tools to see if he could go deeper by clearing the sides, and it worked really, really well. After scraping for a few hours, Ted was able to get through much easier, but it was still tight. He had to do the breathe in, breathe out method to get through. But this time he was so confident that he didn't tie the rope around his feet. Ted shimmied his way in the way they had done before, and B was so excited that he was cheering him on because they thought they were going to get to the new passage. Then it happened. Ted came out of the other side and was able to look around. Ted thought about the passage he had just gone through and realized that B was not going to be able to enter just because it was so tight and that he was larger and slightly disabled. But because they were so desperate to know what secrets lied in this new unexplored area, they decided that Ted would go explore for half an hour by himself, and that if anything happened, B would go up and get help from others. So now Ted was in this nice hallway. He was able to go through in a crouched way, and the first thing he saw was these really cool crystals embedded in the wall. He went further and further until he found this large chamber. This is where he had a big surprise. At the end of this room was this large round egg-shaped rock. He even took a picture of it for his blog, where you can see the rock leaning against the wall. But as soon as Ted entered that chamber with the rock, he began to feel uneasy, like someone was watching him. And once he was in the large rock room, he noticed that there was another tunnel on the far side of the room. he suddenly started to feel really alone, and he decided that he should head back because the time was almost up for him to be back. But as he was walking back, he noticed something on one of the walls. There was a drawing there that was not too clear, but it looked like ancient diagrams. It was like a pictogram of a group of people standing below this huge unknown symbol and raising their hands up as if they were worshiping whatever it was. Ted was so excited to see that someone had been here in the past, and he took a picture with his disposable camera to show everybody. And he headed back, and as soon as he got to the whole entrance, he started talking so fast that B had to tell him to slow down. Then he squeezed his way through the shaft, and B took this picture of him. As he shimmied his way through, though, he started hearing noises coming from behind him, like there was rock sliding on rock. But he was able to exit the shaft, and he didn't really think it was that important. He didn't even tell B about it. A few days later, he got his pictures developed, and he noticed something really strange. All the pictures taken before entering the large chamber looked fine and they looked good, but the ones taken in the room with the rock in it were completely blank, which was really odd because all the others were fine. It was also a shame because he didn't get a picture of the cool cave drawings. April 14th, 2001. Ted and B had decided that they needed another caver to go exploring with them if they were going to properly explore Floyd's tomb. So they brought along a friend that they had recently met named Joe, who was smaller and he was good at getting through tight spaces. They didn't end up telling Joe about the things that they had experienced before in the cave, just because they didn't think it was worth noting. I probably would have told him. But they ended up going into the cave and entering Floyd's tomb with Joe. Ted and Joe entered. B had to stay on the outside because he's bigger, you know. After passing the equipment through the tight space, Ted was reaching down to pick it up when he smacked his head on the side of the wall and maybe had a concussion. He decided that he felt so bad that he shouldn't go exploring with Joe, so he just stayed back. He felt pretty bad. So he told Joe, go ahead and go explore on your own, you'll be fine. And so that's what Joe did. He headed down the passage. After a good amount of time, however, Joe didn't return, and Ted and B started to worry. They yelled his name, they were trying to get him to answer. Ted even decided that he was going to go back in and search for him because he wasn't showing up. But just as he was getting ready to go through, Joe showed up. They asked through the passageway if Joe was okay, and he said no as his only reply. Joe then came through Floyd's tomb through the tight space, and they could tell that he looked ghost white, and he was saying that he didn't feel so well. They quickly left that day because Joe was feeling so terrible, and on the way home, Joe didn't say anything. Ted asked him if he heard any yelling or if he had seen the egg-shaped rock, and Joe just told him no, as his only reply. As they dropped him off at the house, they asked if he wanted to go with them another time because they were planning on going in a few days, but he just shook his head no and went inside. Very strange. April 28th, 2001. Ted and B both contacted Joe, but he wouldn't answer. Even whenever they would knock on his door, he wouldn't open to anyone. So they decided to go explore on their own. They got this two-way phone that was connected with a wire so they could contact each other. When they entered the cave that day, however, it seemed like some supernatural force did not want them there. Nothing went smoothly. All the knots they tied had to be retied. The clips kept breaking. But eventually, they got to the entrance of Floyd's tomb. This day, Ted decided to bring a video camera and record everything that he saw. Ted entered through the tiny space, crawling with all of his gear, and he unspooled wire to his two-way phone connecting him back to B. Once again, when he entered the large chamber with the egg-shaped rock, he started to feel really strange. But today, he decided to go through the room to the other side where there's another passage. When he got into this new passage, it seemed like it was deeper and darker than anything else. It was like it was consuming light. He continued a little ways into this passage that was low. He had to crouch down to get through it, until he suddenly heard this super loud rock scraping that was coming from the large chamber behind him. It startled him so much that he stood up tall and he hit his head on the rock ceiling. This quick movement damaged his headlight and made it shut off, and it hurt his neck really, really bad. He sat in complete darkness for a few minutes before he decided he really needed to get out his emergency glow sticks that he had in his bag. So he frantically searched for those and he finally found them, but he sat there for a second scared of cracking one because of what the glow might reveal. But when he cracked it, he strained to see what was on the other side of the room, but he couldn't see anything. He immediately picked up his phone and tried to contact B, but he realized that the phone wasn't working for some reason. He was nearly paralyzed with fear, but thinking that something could have happened to B gave him courage. So he threw a glow stick into the large room to see if there was something in there. That's when he noticed that the large rock, the large egg-shaped rock, had moved, and that's what the loud noise had been. He also noticed that the rock had severed their phone line that connected back to B. But the most terrifying thing of all is what moved the rock, and that the rock was sitting on this deep, dark hole, acting as a door to whatever was beneath this rock. He began to think about the implications of this and he immediately decided that he needed to get out as quick as possible. He began to frantically run through all the caverns, hitting his arms and legs on the side, getting really scratched up, his neck was messed up. He couldn't help but think that there's a legion of demons pursuing him through the tunnels. When he reached the point to where he was in yelling distance of B, he yelled to ask if B was alright, and he said he was fine. But he told B that he needed to get out as fast as possible. As Ted was stuffing his gear into the passage for B to pull back through, he realized that he had dropped his camera back when he hit his head. For a split second, he thought about going back to get it, but he was like, no, of course not. He realized it was gone, and then he frantically crawled back through the shaft towards B, which he got even more scraped up because, he has to do the breathing to get through, and I think he just went for it. He shimmied through as fast as he could, and he noticed as he was halfway through that this putrid odor was coming from behind him, and it was overpowering him, and he was like trying not to gag. Little side note, if you know anything about monster or cryptid stories, for some reason every time there's a large monster sighting, the people always say that there's this horrible odor that follows whatever it is. So keep that in mind. He finally popped through the hole and then rolled on the floor. He was in so much pain that he could barely breathe due to the scrapes in his neck and hitting his head. He laid there on the floor for a second, but then he started to hear scraping sounds coming from the other side of the hole. Ted scrambled to get to his feet and then ran towards B, who was already climbing up the ropes to get out of the cave. Ted had no time to put the harness on, and instead decided to free climb out of the cave, but it was super risky because if he fell off he would have died. The smell of death followed them as they got closer to the exit of the cave. As they got closer to the mouth, Ted started to hear this zipping sound behind him, and he turned around to notice that the rope was being pulled back into the cave. Whatever was down there was trying to pull them down with him. Ted screamed at this and then scrambled up to the top, thinking that the thing was really close to reaching them and it was climbing up the rope. They noticed the rope really moving and they decided to cut the rope. They started cutting with their little pocket knives. It started to fray and then finally snapped, falling back into the darkness of the cave. Ted and B then laid there for a while in complete disbelief. Finally, after a long time, they got into their truck and drove home, not talking all the way home. Alright, May 19th, 2001. A lot of people tried to reach out to Ted and try to talk to him because of his last post. They were really freaked out, and he just hadn't responded. He had been having nightmares every night, and he had said that he had been seeing things at night too, like a shadowy figure that was following him, and hearing noises that he couldn't explain while he was awake. Then for some reason he had this strange impulse to go to this lookout that looks out over his city, where he then met Joe, who had the same strange impulse to go there. Like something had drawn both of them together. It was now clear that Joe had experienced a similar thing whenever he went off in the cave alone. Ted said, "We need to return. Tomorrow good?" Joe replied, "Yeah, at noon." And they left. Ted went to B's house to go see him. They hadn't talked since their experience together about a month ago. Ted explained to B about Joe and his plan to go explore the cave again, and B agreed to go with him. Ted made a final blog post saying that himself, Joe, and B were all going back to get closure, because they were possibly being haunted by their own thoughts. But this time they were going armed with shotguns, so they were potentially trying to kill the creature. He then tells his readers this on his site. "For my family and friends who are reading this, I say be at peace. I will conquer this cave, then I will return and update this website immediately. I expect to be home later tonight or tomorrow at the latest. See you all soon with lots of answers. Love, Ted." And this was the last update Ted ever did on his online blog. And we can assume that whatever had scared them so much probably killed them because he never made another blog post. So what the heck was that creature that was terrorizing them? And did they potentially open it up to the rest of the world? Probably. In Ted's last blog post, he also theorized about the monster that they had encountered being this ancient creature called the Hodag. Now, the Hodag is this creepy looking creature from American folklore. It looks like this large horned bull thing that's a carnivore with rows of spines down its back. It was said that the Hodag came into existence from a cremated ox and was an incarnation of animals that were abused by the hands of their masters. The Hodag is said to live in caves, and its origins came from a tall tale that took place in Wisconsin in 1893. It's not necessarily a real creature, it's kind of like Bigfoot. So this entire story of Ted the Caver was widely believed to be real because of how detailed it was, until there was a post in a real caving forum of someone claiming to be Ted, coming out and saying that he created the story as a fun writing project. This guy who claims to be Ted gives some details about the characters and how they're all based on people in real life. He explains that the cave, Mystery Cave, is a real place called Interstate Cave that has an interstate running over it that makes creepy noises. So everything in the story is real. The cave is real, the hole is real, the wind blowing through is real, the rumbling's real, the getting into the new passage is real. However, the monster stuff is not necessarily real, according to this guy who said he was Ted. So if this guy in this forum is telling the truth, then this story is obviously fake. However, there's some that believe that this forum post is a diversion from the actual story, and that it's a cover-up from a really evil thing that's lurking somewhere in the United States that they opened up, and it's a cover-up and things like that. But all around, I think it's a really interesting idea. There's a lot of theories why people go missing here in the US, and there's a map that has the missing people along with the cave systems that line up perfectly. It's really strange. You could say, oh yeah, people go missing in caves, you know, they just get lost in caves. It's like, there's a huge amount of people going missing. I mean, a lot larger than almost anything else. But some believe that there's an external force that is making people go missing close to caves. They theorize that there's cryptids or ancient creatures that lurk in caves that sometimes come out and prey on those who are close, which would really explain a lot about the missing 411 cases and things like that. Seems pretty fishy to me. Anyways, great story, right? If you liked it, hit subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. We're about to hit 50K. What the heck? This is epic. I hope you enjoyed my video. I want to build a good community on here, so thank you guys for being here. Potentially make some cool stuff that makes you think the world is more magical than what everybody wants to tell you, but it is. We live in a magical world. It's crazy. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good day.